This is the future. Evolution.
The Crossing Realms Conference launches September 19th and 20th and will dock in Richmond, Missouri. This is already being called the event of the year, folks, with an unprecedented list of speakers and special guests, 2 days of cryptids, UFOs, and paranormal presentations, along with a celebrity-filled ghost hunt, meet and greet, gallery reading, vendors, and a film screening. This promises to be both educational and fun. Go to eventbrite.com to secure your tickets and vendor slots before they are all abducted. They're going fast.
Yes, everybody, those tickets, they're getting abducted. It's not too far away. I'm not wishing the summer away at all. What is today? July 1st already. In 2 more months, we've got July, we got August, then right around mid-September, we got the event of the year, 20 speakers and special guests at this extravaganza. We've got a ghost hunt, a film screen. We've got it all. BMR staying at a haunted ranch along with the girls and some of our friends. We're doing a pre-party that Thursday. I am looking forward to it. But with that being said, I want to enjoy July. I want to enjoy August and then glide and smooth right into September. Thanks to everybody for coming on. This, of course, is BMR, Beyond BMR. If you're new here, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, that's what BMR stands for. Please subscribe if you're new, and please subscribe to the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast. I have the lovely Christa waiting in the wings, and I got a great guest. Trey Hudson, author, researcher, 2 books out, The Meadow Project, Return to the Meadow. Fascinating researcher and person in general. It's going to be a fantastic show, and I'll be bringing up Trey shortly. I do have to thank everybody, though, before we get started. A little other bit of business, which I like to do, is like to personally thank everybody that's bought my books, found on Amazon. Bigfoot Michigan Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1 and Book 2. Simply type Bigfoot Michigan Rob in your Amazon browser. For those that bought it, leave a review. It does help promote book sales. Everything is analytics these days, just like YouTube when you hit that like button. So please don't forget to do that. And I appreciate you. And also, the Super Chat's open, a great way to help support what we all do around here. You too can become a BMR pirate, mateys. Arr, mateys. Join today, join the many, join the few, depending on your point of view. Thank you. You get a picture of good old BMR sporting a bandana next to your name in the chat room. That's what you get. I see everybody's already piling on it. We got Mickey G, Ristle, Sweetly Morbid, Gary Spikes, Greg Ogles, Freaky Geek, Marion L. Butt. Hi, Diane Boss, Jojo. Scrolling down, Ben YouTubing. Hi, Ben YouTubing. Good to see you. Laverna, how you doing? Wizard Moon, Andres, David and Murphy, T-Bone. T-Bone's moniker is himself sporting a BMR t-shirt, by the way. When you look at T-Bone, that's me. And T-Bone, of course, per usual, 5 more pirates tonight, courtesy of T-Bone. Thank you to T-Bone. I'm scrolling down. MK Ultra, Paranormal Paul, Bigfoot Dwarf. Whole bunch here piling on. Wendell, hi Wendell, Bonnie, hi, boy, oh boy, you guys are blowing up already. We just started. Joe Stewart, off to a great start. Thanks, T-Bone. Scrolling down, if I missed you, I apologize. I got a great show in line. Ben YouTubing with a super chat to start. What a great start for the show. All right. So a lot of pressure on Trey now. A lot of pressure. Great start to the show. Trey's an awesome guy. Before I bring up Trey, I got to bring up the lovely Christa.
Hey.
Hello, Christa. What's happening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm glad to have you back. I missed you last week. I didn't miss you. You're on vacation. You were off for a month, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, then pretty much. Well, last week, though, it was my friend, that passed away. So
yeah, well, that's, again, the downside of things.
kind of a bummer thing, but yeah, I'm back and it's all good. So
Yeah, well, always a pleasure to have you back. Last week, Dr. Dennis Carroll was on. And, I really didn't even need a co-host because, when Dennis Carroll gets on the show,
he's great. Yep.
I had so many questions asked, but he answered every question before I could even ask him because he is just that good.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. Thanks, Keith.
thank you to Keith as well. T-Bone, Keith, Ben YouTubing. Yeah, so that's outstanding. Thanks for coming back. Always great to see you back.
Yep.
And
you know what? I got to tell you something though.
yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. We got to, and I know this is not your Saturday night show, but I'm going to say it
It's
anyway.
not.
I got to tell you what I had for dinner tonight, and it was absolutely wonderful.
What did you have?
So you take out a slice of bacon, okay? Then you
Okay.
take a thin layer of hamburger and put it on there. And then you roll it up. And so you got these little rose looking bacon hamburger things, and you grill them. Oh my God, they were good.
Oh, that sounds right up my alley.
Every bite had bacon. Oh, man, it was really good. Just saying,
No.
throwing it out
No,
there.
you can bring that up because I do a show Saturday night with the Blondes and the Booze and Monica, the three ladies. And
Yeah,
myself.
I know that's our Saturday night topic, but I had to tell you because
Yeah, well, that's a Saturday night
just
topic
had it.
because we always start that show. We talk food from all around the world because people love food.
or mayonnaise.
Yeah, we did 40 minutes of the Dukes versus Hellman's mayonnaise
We did.
challenge, which was probably one of the most popular shows we've done, believe it or
I
not.
know that hilarious.
40 minutes before we got into weirdness, high strangeness, right? But but that's why we're a variety show. We do everything from cryptids to the paranormal, and we like to mix in some levity, some comedy, because not everything can be serious.
That's right.
So we mix it up as we can around every day of the week. So you got to have variety to keep people coming back. And thanks to everybody for coming on in. With that being said, we got a great guest, Trey Hudson. I'm bringing him up. 3, 2, 1. Hello, Trey.
How's it going, everybody?
Hi.
Hey, pretty good, Trey. Pretty good. Great to see you again.
Yeah, good to be here. Happy to see y'all. It's I hope everybody's having a great summer and is getting ready to go roaring into the 4th. And have a good weekend and a good week. And just happy to be here. If I got any more excited, I'd spontaneously combust.
That would be something. That would we would go viral
right here. So
we would go viral if that happened. We don't want that to happen, Trey.
Right.
We don't want that to happen. Yeah, it's great to see you. It's ready the 4th of July coming up. Right, I can't believe 4th of July. I guess is Friday. They're telling me.
Yeah,
I know, right?
I mean, as I said
My
earlier,
favorite holiday.
it's one of my favorite holidays. I love the holidays when we support our veterans. I know, Trey, you're involved. You're a veteran. My father was. My uncle.
Thank you.
were.
Yes.
And I don't. It's not my favorite holiday because of the festivities. 4th of July, Memorial Weekend, Labor Day. Those three are like boom. Then of course Christmas. But yeah, so I appreciate all of our servicemen and women in the world. So thank you, Trey, for that.
quite well.
Thank you.
So yeah, Trey, I mean, I don't need you to give the bio. You can do whatever you want to do. Just if you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, feel free, because we're going to get into some of the Meadow Project in your 2 books. But I had a couple starting questions on the top of my head before we roll into that for more people who are on the chat. So, your expertise, and I don't like using that word, and people don't like when I say it. I get expert. No one's an expert. But you started in the military and securities, and then you found your way into the paranormal somehow.
Yeah, it's people that have heard me speak before. I got into really the paranormal first. I was a child of the 70s, so I grew up watching In Search Of and Project UFO and that wonderful mock documentary Sasquatch: The Legend of Bigfoot. Which is a fantastic cheesy 70s fake documentary on the big guy.
Yeah.
And so I just really love that stuff, and kind of stayed interested in it all through high school. I went to university, studied under Dr. William Roll, famous parapsychologist, and some others there at the University of West Georgia. And then came the big L, life. It just came screaming at me. I was commissioned as an Army intelligence officer, went into the reserves, got injured,
ended my military career, then rolled into federal service for 34 years. Back in about 2000 and I think it was right before I went to Afghanistan, about 2008, I during the heyday of the paranormal TV shows, you remember, just when everything was just wide open.
Yep.
I got involved with a local paranormal group, and we did the typical, haunted houses and haunted businesses, and we had our K2s, and did all of that, and nothing wrong with that. But anybody that was in the business at that time, when that kind of started drifting away from the public awareness, referrals just tanked, for us anyway. We used to get a lot of TAPS referrals, and they just dried up. And you can, if you're in kind of a rural area like we are, you can only research the same place so many times before people just get sick of you. So I started researching outdoors, started going into the into some of the areas of rich folklore, and cast a very wide net all over the Southeast. And that's how we stumbled across the Meadow. It was actually, a ghost guy. I'm a ghost guy at heart. Basically morphing into, ended up as a MUFON field investigator. And, I studied under the tutelage of people like Bob Wilson and, some of the other people we know in the cryptid world. And so I'm a, kind of a cryptid guy, a UFO guy, but basically I'm a weird crapologist. That's what I am now. If it's weird crap, I am neck deep in it. And, if anybody's been following the Meadow Project since, I released the first book in 2021, it's weird. I mean, it's just absolutely weird. Now, I heard you mention the O guy, that crazy Greg Ogles. He's been out to the Meadow, several times, and he's got his own stories from out there.
Right.
So it's, it's just been a hell of a ride, and retired from federal service a few years ago. So now I get to do my, my real vocation, which is being a weird crapologist full time.
I love that, a crapologist.
It's just weird crap,
Yeah, love it.
Studies crap, either a proctologist or a crapologist, and I know I'm not a proctologist. I don't have an MD. By default, I'm a crapologist.
Yeah,
bring the crap.
Of all the things you can study in medicine, I think I'd probably put a big no to the crapologist. That's just not my.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's kind of a shitty job.
It is. I tell you what, I respect.
I'm sorry. Lost my interest in the monologue there.
No, we're not on the radio. We're not live on the radio. YouTube, the shit word is fine on YouTube. Okay. I think.
Yeah, we've never been docked for that one.
And we also are on podcasts, and you can say whatever on a podcast.
Yeah.
But that kind of reminds you, talking about weird stuff. I've been doing this now about 3 years, and I've written several books. I've had a lot of guests on, and here's the thing that I want to ask you, because I know you are kind of a science guy as well. And we get all these stories. I get them. Brandy, Christa. Yes. And it's kind of, and I don't dismiss any story to somebody as me, right?
Right.
I just don't. I didn't walk in their shoes.
Right.
But here's the thing. But here's the thing that always bugs me, though, when we talk about science, right? Why do these science people dismiss the average Joe Blow, the average pedestrian, when they have an experience?
It's because and that's kind of a neat topic, because ever since like the Industrial Revolution, and even before that, the Age of Enlightenment, when science really started coming to the forefront, and you had great scientific advances, with Newton and and all of the the forerunners of that. Everybody put the mystery in our lives to the side, and we all dropped down and prostrated ourselves into the altar, in front of the altar of science. Right. I am not anti-science. Don't hear what I'm not saying.
Right.
But somewhere in the midst of that, we lost our sense of being human.
Right.
And part of being human are experiences. And unfortunately, experiences are very hard to measure. And if you are locked step into the scientific method, it has to be measurable, collectible, and repeatable. And that's pretty hard to do with experiences. Now, those of us that have gone out there and have done some of that stuff, with either parapsychology or all this, and then you put that out there, it's quickly dismayed or quickly discounted. And my minor's in anthropology, and I remember hearing a professor of mine, and I don't even know if he's still alive, but I'm not going to mention his name. And I said, why is anthropology, specifically archaeology, that's what, I kind of specialized in, why is it so locked step, and everybody says the same thing. And if any one crab starts to crawl out of the pot, the other crabs in archaeology pull them back into the pot of compliance. And he says, because we have to be published. He says, we have to get grants, we have to publish, and those articles have to be peer reviewed. And so nobody strays too far outside of the very narrow lanes of normalcy that they have in science. And it's the same way with physics, chemistry, and all of your other sciences. And we have kind of really started focusing as a culture on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which I'm not an anti-STEM guy. I like my lights to work and my internet to run, so I obviously like STEM. But we've gotten away from a traditional liberal arts education, which the idea of that was to make a well-rounded person, somebody that was versed in science, was versed in the humanities, could quote literature, could understand rhetoric. And we've moved away from that, and we've become a species of specialist, and not a species of Renaissance men. And that's what I've always strived to be myself personally, is a Renaissance man and a polymath. A person interested in many things and an expert in none.
Right.
I agree with that. I don't dismiss science. I don't think anybody does. You really can't, can you? It's just that, hey, there's things that we just can't explain.
Right.
My Bigfoot encounter is unexplainable, but guess what? I don't care. It happened to me. You can't take that from me.
Well, let me give you an example. The Van Allen radiation belt around the Earth. I think it was discovered, and I'm having to get in, Mr. Peabody and I are having to get in the Wayback Machine here. I'm trying to remember. I think it was 1958,
right, when
the Van Allen radiation belt was discovered. Okay, does that mean prior to 1958 the Van Allen radiation belt didn't exist? No, it just means we didn't know about it.
Right.
So what kind of amazing, crazy things are we going to discover, as a culture, as a species in the future, that we're discounting now? If you go back to the 19th century, when you talked about the spread of disease, there was the mimosa theory, which is you could breathe bad air. Bad air caused diseases, and so now we know that it's through, bad hygiene can cause diseases, cholera, bad hygiene, bad public utilities, things like sewage and all of that. And so, what's waiting for us? And I don't mean to sound like that I'm a big, huge AI fan. I kind of look at it with a bit of, suspicion. But, once we start taking the tools of AI that can start putting together a lot of pieces very quickly, what discoveries are going to be made very quick. And as science advances, discovery advances, you start seeing the gap between remarkable discoveries getting closer and closer. So, I believe in the experiential, that's my degrees in humanistic and transpersonal psychology, but I also believe in the empirical, and let's look at the science too. And when you put the two together, that's when you really start to learn things.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I would ask you this then, with that being said, when you go out in the field researching, do you have like a plan? Is a part of science involved in your plan?
Yeah. It's twofold, is the anomalous studies and observation group, the team that, I lead, is we have 1 foot in the empirical. We go out there and, I'll issue an operations order before we go out. And this is kind of, this is what we're going to look at, guys. We've been seeing these pinpricks of light, out in the forest. So we're going to try to capture that. So we're going to bring our, psionics Aurora cameras. We're going to bring our other night vision. We're going to bring our thermals. We've got kind of a plan of operation. We've also been seeing radiation spikes. So we're going to have our Geiger counters. But also, we're going to capture the experience. So we have 1 foot in the empirical and 1 foot in the experiential. And, you know, my attitude has always been, if you have these remarkable, amazing things happen with all this data, you know, reams of data, you know, and a human being isn't there to look at the data or even more so experience, what's the friggin' point? Why bother? You know, we're human beings. We're storytellers. You know, we want to live our lives by learning from others. And if people can't have the experience along with the data, then, you know, I kind of have to question what's the importance of the data.
I agree with that. And data, of course, is a big sticking point with all of us, you know, myself and Christa and such. And so then when you're out in the field, let me ask you this. You're in the field. Do you like to let the experience just happen, or do you do anything to incite or manifest the experience?
Yeah, but a little bit of both. I am not a big fan of provoking. I think that's, well, I think you're just being you're being a butthole, you know,
Right.
that's not how I roll. You know, I try not to be like that. But we will do things like the Estes method. We've had some amazing, incredible results from the Estes method. And Greg will tell you about one Estes session that he was.
And really quickly, you're talking Christa's language. She is the ghost, the Renaissance ghost person.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, we had some remarkable stuff in the various Estes sessions we've done, you know, which is very experiential. You know, so we try to let the experience happen. And the weird thing about the Meadow is, and as I just found out last week, when you just about think you have it figured out, you don't. You do not have it figured out. It throws you a bizarre curveball from left field that you were not expecting. And, you know, oftentimes it changes your paradigm. Like my paradigm was changed last week, and I'm pretty open-minded. So, you know, we do a little bit of both. You know, sometimes we let the experience just happen. You know, we've had some amazing things just as crazy as it sounds, sitting around base camp. But we've also had amazing things doing stuff like the SD sessions, CE5 protocols, and stuff like that.
Very cool. What do you think about, like, there's so many places that are so similar to the Meadow. You know, we have one here in Missouri. They call it Marley Woods. You've got Skinwalker Ranch. You've got, you know, Bradshaw Ranch. There's so many of them. What do you think the common denominator is with all of these places?
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because the first part of my second book is called Congruences. And I have first chapter is the Bradshaw Ranch. Second chapter is Marley Woods.
There you go.
Third chapter is Stardust Ranch. And the fourth chapter is Katie Page's Colorado Branch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I started looking at, you know, commonalities at all of these places. And, you know, one of the things that I'm finding are cryptids. Orbs, disembodied voices. And I think that there are certain places, you know, based on some people, some scientists I've been working on in the past week or so, is I think there are places where I'm not going to say reality is thin, but John Keel talked about something called ultra terrestrials, which were beings that were basically in a hyper dimension. And in my first book, I coined the term paradimensionals, because I think it's a little bit more of an accurate descriptor.
Sure.
And these paradimensionals are around us all the time. I mean, continuously around us all the time, moving in and out of us as they manifest in their dimension down into our 3 dimensions out, and they, you know, tickle our Euclidean understanding of length, width, and height, and they move back into their dimensions. And I think there are places where, for whatever reason, and, you know, James Keenan talks about, you know, geomagnetism, you know, that's his thing. We don't have a geomagnetic anomaly. It's a meadow, which is really weird, because you have, seem to see that mostly west of the Mississippi, which is kind of odd. I talked to Steve Mira about this over in the UK, which is, you know, with his Doorway project. So there's, you know, some kind of weird stuff with, you know, geomagnetism. But what we're finding is that the experiencer is a huge catalyst, absolutely a huge catalyst. And we've even gone to the point of, before we go out, we actually are running people through God helmet sessions. They're in the field. They're at base camp. So we kind of primed the pump metaphysically with at least one member. And then when we go out, it seems to make make whatever it is more receptive to our interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And the phenomena is evolving. The phenomena that we encountered, back in 2020 is not the same phenomena we're encountering today.
Let me ask you something really quick, maybe it's not off subject, but you mentioned the God's helmet.
I did just write down a question for him about that.
Well, I'll let you give him the question then. I'll turn it over to you.
No,
because I'm going to be doing the God's helmet. We're going to I'm be staying at a haunted ranch in September to do some for our conference, but I'm also going to be doing some investigating of my own, and we're also going on a ghost hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be a ghost hunt, a God's helmet involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I'm going to wear it.
Right.
So, and I trust the girls. I trust them. People are saying, Rob, you shouldn't do it. People are saying, Rob, yeah, that's fine. What's your assessment on wearing that apparatus?
Yeah, it's first give you a little bit of background of what it is and what it isn't. It's not the helmet that Rick Moranis' character puts on in the original Ghostbusters. That's right. Not it. Well, that might be kind of cool, but this isn't it. What it does is if you go and you look at the science behind it with Persinger and Corrin, Stanley Corrin were the two gentlemen that developed the God helmet. And what they found is that if you use very light electromagnetic stimulation of certain parts of your brain, it can cause mystic experiences. Now, the particular program that we use is I use a 40 hertz chirp signal that alternates between your left and right amygdala. So what that's doing is during the first 20 minutes is it's alternating back and forth. And what that's doing is creating a handshake between your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere. Very similar to Robert Monroe's hemisync. Is you're trying to get both sides of the brain to start working together. And then once you get that total brain communications going, then the last 20 minutes, I do a 40 hertz stimulation of specifically your left amygdala. Now, your left amygdala is the more feeling part of your brain that's responsible for mystic experiences, holistic encounters, things like that. And we've had people that are going through the latter 20-minute session say they have felt like somebody standing there watching them when there's nobody there. They're in like a big pavilion by themselves. And so my theory on that is that gray squishy thing inside of your head isn't really your brain. That's a 3-dimensional shadow of a 4-dimensional organ, which is your brain. Your brain is actually a multi-dimensional organ. That's why we can do things like remote viewing. So, what it does is it actually puts you in contact and stimulates the awareness of the 4-dimensional or multi-dimensional aspects of yourself, i.e. your brain. Mm-hmm. And so I can get into the whole, SRI and the opening of the liminal window with the remote viewing. I can go down that. But basically, it starts kind of thinning out that barrier between liminal, the liminal barrier, and then what we experience here, in our conscious waking states. And so what we found, though, is when you have one or two people in a team that does that, it's like it's a contagion. Is now everybody can experience more. Right. Now, we've also brought we have a psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst on our staff now. And what he will do is a lot of times before we go out is we will go through guided, I'm not really going to call it meditation because that's probably not the right word, but guided sessions where we all become of one mind and one purpose. And what we found is people start having the same thoughts and the same imagery while we're going through this guided session without communicating. So everybody starts getting on the same metaphysical sheet of music. Now, when you do that, and then you go out to a place like the Meadow where the veil is already thin, with intent, with purpose, with a plan, with this hyped up sensibility, like Oddball said in the movie Kelly's Heroes, man, maybe we can't lose. Mm.
Yeah. So quick question about the God's helmet. What What have, like, Greg Ogles is in chat, and
Yeah.
he came up here and at the museum, a friend of ours has a God's helmet, and so he wanted to wear her helmet.
Mhm.
And he saw what he saw was like an alien, but it wasn't in our dimension. It was almost like he was in its dimension. And
Right.
we've had other people who have seen alien type creatures wearing the God's helmet. And then we've had, like Paranormal Paul, he was in chat. He's seen his past relatives. So he had good experiences. Some people
Right.
had bad. What have people out there at the Meadow seen by wearing the God's helmet? I'm really curious about that.
Greg had, and I'm not going to, go into Greg's experience. He had a pretty amazing session with it. Sometimes you have imagery.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have just audio, audible,
Mhm.
sounds. And sometimes it's just a feeling.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to really, it's very
Mhm.
personal. Everybody's experience is very personal.
Sure.
For me personally, mine is basically kind of like an OBE, kind of like an out of body,
Mhm.
where I'll be falling, but I'm like out of my body, but not completely out of my body.
Mhm.
Not a lot of visuals for me, but other people have had visuals. So it's it's a very personal thing. Basically what I tell people is, your experience is yours, and whatever that means to you,
Mhm.
it's special. So, take from it, learn from it, and hopefully, be able to work with it, and have amazing experiences of your own.
Well, you mentioned. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just really quickly, what I was going to ask then was this. It's a personal thing and a personal experience. Maybe it's something from your past, maybe a relative. But let me ask you this. I was talking to several people, quite a few people actually. In fact, a couple people that we're going to be with in September for our conference. But they also made mention to me, Rob, if you have that pineal gland open, you've got that third eye rolling and you're into it. If there's anything else in a room, like let's say an alien, let's just call it an alien. It could be anything.
Yeah.
That could present itself to you while experiencing the God's helmet. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool, I guess. You never know until you experience it.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything like that, or is what they were telling me hogwash, or you think
No,
like you said, it's up to the person?
Yeah, it's up to the person, but you can go back and you can read, the studies in academic papers of Persinger, and he talks about a presence, when people were using, this device. Now, something that I do need to say is, you start talking about an alien is a term. That's just a label.
Yeah.
I think aliens and ghosts, and I think all of that stuff is interconnected.
Sure.
I think,
Okay. Gotcha.
You do too.
If you kind of go back and you read some of the earlier stuff by Brad Steiger, he talks about, thought forms and that we influence what we see. If a religious person would see a Marian apparition, a ghost hunter would see a ghost, that we really influence what we see. So, with that being the case, that we are encountering the other, we are interacting with the other, that can have a certain existential heaviness to it. Okay. And something I always tell people is, if you're going to get into this business, and I'm not talking about, going over to your Aunt Edna's house who says it's haunted with your voice recorder in a K2 meter you got off of eBay. I'm talking about if you're really going to get into this stuff, is you really have got to have a belief system. You have to, because it keeps you grounded. You have to be prepared physically. You have to be prepared mentally. You have to be prepared spiritually, and you have to be prepared psychologically, or you could have some really negative outcomes of this. So that's something that I always tell people. We have a waiver that people sign to use the God helmet. Is, understand that people have had very negative experiences with this. It's, it's kind of like ayahuasca. Some people have had very good experiences and other people have had very horrible experiences.
Yeah.
So you would suggest this for a person that's, wishy-washy. You gotta have someone's got a strong constitution and they have an open mind, and what they experience, accept it and just roll with it, right?
Right. Just, it's like anything, in this stuff, is sometimes you have to, instead of fighting the phenomena, just let it happen. Just, be there in the here and now.
Yep.
and learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just feel like, like you talked about, some people have bad experiences, and I've witnessed people who've had bad encounters with it, but then same people who have had, really good encounters with it. But I truly, truly believe, like you mentioned the OBE, and when Greg had his, he said like he was in their realm, and I believe maybe he did. That's what he had,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, like I said, we think about, we're trapped in this meat suit all the time when we're really not.
Right.
And so if we're not in the meat suit realm, we are in their realm.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And there's nothing to be scared of, but it's, it's a little unnerving. And Greg has had some really, really neat experiences. It's been a real pleasure working with him.
Yeah,
he's good.
I know Greg pretty well. I've met him once. I think it was in Alabama, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I met you, Trey, 3 years ago in Alabama.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. That's how I first met you. And we did a show. Was it my show or yours, Christa? And we had Paranormal Paul was wearing the God's helmet in an actual haunted location.
It was your show.
It was mine. And so we did a live. We were live at the scene where the blondes and the boos were, and when Paul had that experience, it was for him. It was emotional. It was people from his past, grandfather. It was crazy, and I could tell though, the way he was speaking, and after he took it off and re-explained his thoughts, his images, he did have an experience. And then I said, "Yeah, I have to try this."
Yeah,
because it was so genuine. He saw something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think it's for everybody, especially if like you're prone to seizures or things like that. I don't, you definitely don't need to be doing it. But somebody who's like open to, as far as like on the psychic medium side, I think they need to really, pay attention to what they're doing if they're going to do it, and have the proper intentions, I feel. Because they're so open. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, I know. I agree. I mean, I'm actually a psychic extra large myself, not a psychic medium. No, I'm not psychic at all. I'm kidding.
Right.
But but you need to go into it with the right attitude. And it's not just the God helmet. You've got to go into anything in this business with the right attitude.
And it's the right attitude with anything you do in life. Of course, we all talk paranormal and everything else, high strangeness. Also, I learned this a couple of years ago from the girls, Christa and Brandy. It's all about your intentions, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Is if you go in there with a negative, a negative expectation, you'll have a negative experience.
Bingo.
And sometimes even negative experiences are positive experiences, but you won't have that revelation until maybe years later.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. There's so much to it, a lot of people just see the TV shows and they're not really showing you, like how long you really do sit in rooms and nothing happens. And, it's not all what the TV shows make it up to be at all.
It's not.
Nope.
I'm going to let you in on a secret. I was a private investigator in Atlanta back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not like the TV shows either.
No.
Oh, bummer. Dang it. I hang on to every word of the TV shows.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to be Magnum PI.
My favorite show growing up, Trey, and I'm just going to say, and everyone knows this that knows me, that's been following me. I had a fad in high school where I became Don Johnson. Yes, I sported the Miami Vice apparel with the white leather loafers. The the Ray-Bans. Mom, buy me a pair of Ray-Bans. They're $100, son. Well, oh, really? Well, come on.
But they're Ray-Bans.
Right. Ever since that day, that's my favorite sunglasses that I wear now. Now I don't have to rely on Mom to buy my Ray-Bans. But
a quick funny Don Johnson.
Yeah, go ahead.
1980 story is I was in college in the 80s. Mm-hmm. What a time to be in college and a fraternity guy in the 80s, man! It was fantastic. But I was at I went to a Halloween party, and one of my buddies, wanted to go as Don Johnson. So he had on the white slacks, the white blazer, with the popped collar, the kind of teal colored T-shirt,
Mhm.
and he's there, and and he thinks he is just the dude. I've got all I'm lacking is the Ferrari parked outside, and this girl comes up to him and said, "What are you supposed to be, the effing good humor man?"
Oh no!
And it's like, and
Well,
it was sad. I'm
yeah.
crying about it right now. It was so
No,
sad.
you mentioned a good thing. I had a great time in high school, but when I went to college, my senior year I was big time Miami Vice, Don Johnson guy, and I went to college and I went to a U of M, and I graduated in 1990. So when I was there, man, it was a great time to go to school.
Oh yeah.
I graduated high school in 1990.
Oh, Christa, were you
Yeah.
in high school in 1990? You graduated high school.
1990.
Well, I got 5 years on you, I do believe. I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I graduated college in '87. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I was listening to a show you're on not too long ago, last month or whatever it was.
Oh gosh.
And yeah, well, yeah. And I was just doing homework. I just happened to, if I see Trey on a show, I watch you. And
Stalker.
yeah, I'm a stalker. Hey, I'm a stalker. You mentioned something, and I didn't catch all of it, but I thought it sounded fascinating. You talked about the night goddess, the children of night goddess.
No, that was one of the times where the Meadow just threw us a curveball. It was one of those crazy things, and I'll tell the story. It was back in June of 2020, so it was a few years ago, and we'd been investigating the Meadow for about 3 years, and we decided we were going to go do a CE5 session. Stephen Greer, and I'm not going to get Stephen Greer is a very controversial person, but his CE5 protocol does work. I'm not. So we were going to use the protocol at the Meadow because there have been just tons of UAP reports and stuff in that region. We've seen UAPs in that area. We've had UAP sightings back at base camp, so we thought we would do the CE5 protocol. So quite a few members of my team are trained remote viewers, trained in CRV, the military style remote viewing. So we thought, we've got a pretty good chance of having success. So we go out there and we're in our circle, and I do the blast the crop circle tones, and we're projecting our tent up into the ether, and nothing happened. Nothing at all. We didn't see doodly. We ended up just sitting around talking and spending a nice, beautiful evening with good friends, which is never a bad thing. But we did not have an encounter. So we got back to camp, and Bob Wilson had his own amazing encounter, and that's a whole other weird story. But that's something else that we want to talk about later. But anyway, we went back to camp. Everybody went to bed. Next morning, one of my team members, a gentleman by the name of Tony. Now he's has an engineering degree from the U.S. Air Force Academy. Spent several years in Air Force Special Operations. He's now an SME in his career field. Travels all over the world. Just a very very sound, solid guy. And he said, Trey, he goes, I need to tell you about something. He said, I woke up about 4:30 this morning, about 04:30, and he said, and I was wide awake. And there was a term stuck in my brain, 2 words, and the words were Nox Magby, and spelled phonetically, it would be NOX, November Oscar X-ray, Magby, Mike Alpha Golf, Bravo Echo, Echo, Nox Magby. He said, does that mean anything to you? And I said, not off the top of my head. He goes, and at 6:30, I woke up again with those two words just etched into my brain. And I said, well, Tony, I it doesn't mean anything to me, off the top of my head, but I'll research it and see what I can come up with. So I started looking into it, and Nox, Nox, is the name of the Roman goddess of the night. And it was taken from the Greek Nyx, because the Romans stole a lot of Greek mythology and brought it forward. And so you have the goddess of the night. Magby was a little bit more difficult. And I found the word Magba in the Old English poem Beowulf.
Okay.
And what Beowulf, or what Magba means in that poem, is children or kindred. Now, if you go back and you study the history of Britain, the Romans left Britain, I believe, in 500 or 400, somewhere in there. So the thought that an Old English word or Old English speaker would be familiar with the Nox, the Roman, pantheon of gods and goddesses, is reasonable. So the two words are contemporaneous. They're existed at the same time. So you put those two things together, you have children of the night goddess, Nox Magby. So what comes into people's rooms at night that are small like children, have big heads like children, it might possibly have something to do with the CE5 protocol.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That would be the Greys. So we did get a result, but albeit not in the way that we had expected or intended.
Wow.
So you think that there is, that's with Dr. Stephen Greer, right? Do you think that we can summons, I guess, whatever the appropriate word is, or manifest, or it's not the right word either. But you think that strategy works for certain people?
There's several ways to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
One way is we're actually summoning, and there's some talk about that right now with people being able to summon, vessels, that we're summoning something. And I think that's probably the wrong way to look at it.
Okay.
Because I don't think we're summoning it. I think we're tuning in the frequency where we can see something that's always been there.
Oh, okay.
So I think what we're doing by using our minds and opening up that liminal window, we're opening up the bandwidth of our, if you will think about it like a radio, we're opening up the bandwidth and we can receive frequencies now that we were blind to before. Like, oh crap, these things are in the sky. Well, they've always been in the sky. It's like, oh, we summoned a ghost. Well, paradimensionals are around us all the time. You're not summoning squat. They've always been there. We're just now perceiving them. So I think that's that's a better way and a healthier way of looking at it, is we're not summoning anything. We're just conditioning ourselves to maybe be able to see and perceive something that's always been there.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, makes sense.
That does make sense. Everybody coming on in this, we have Trey Hudson and is my guest, mine and Christa's guest. And Trey, you've got written 2 books, The Meadow Project and Return to the Meadow.
Right.
Is that Return to the Meadow or the Return to the Meadow? Is that
Return to the Meadow?
Yes. Return to the Meadow. You're go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that was a rather blatant plug, but
nevertheless. I want to plug your books.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I know, Trey. It's fine. I have you on the shows. You can plug away all you want. It's part of my job, which I enjoy. I have a lot of authors on, and you're just fascinating because you're right up what Christa and I are all into, right? Everything that you covered, UFOs, aliens, cryptids, ghosts. I mean, the portals, the cube, all these things that we're going to get into. So for people that maybe don't know about the Meadow Project, what is the Meadow?
The Meadow is an area of extreme high strangeness somewhere in America's Southland. And I don't give away the location because if it ever becomes publicly known, the future of research in this area will be ruined. So I keep the area very, very secretive. And everybody that comes out to the Meadow signs a formal legal non-disclosure statement. And I have just a very, very narrow list of things that they can't talk about. But primarily it's the location. And so this area is, a geo concentration of extreme high strangeness. Ryan Skinner, the man who wrote the book on Skinwalker Ranch, the first guy that really started doing it, says that the Meadow rivals Skinwalker Ranch in high strangeness. It's that weird.
Yeah.
And so we have been looking at that area since 2016, and have been watching the phenomena grow watching the phenomena interact with us, and continuously having it throw us strange curveballs and causing us to relook at our understanding of ourselves and the universe in different ways. And as long as the phenomena will allow us and the situation will allow us, we'll continue to investigate this amazing area. And my philosophy has always been, this isn't my story. This isn't my thing. This belongs to the world. The only thing I keep secret is the location. But I want to share this with people. And that's why I have guest researchers come out, and I tell them, whatever happens to you at the Meadow is your experience. That's your story. That's not mine. Go out and tell people about it. Learn from it. And maybe other people at best will learn something themselves, and at least they'll be entertained by the story.
Makes sense.
It is all about the individual experience. It really is. I mean, that's what I thrive on, doing these shows and everything else. Christa, I don't know, you probably agree with me.
For sure.
What was one of the strangest thing at the Meadow when you were first? You know what the Meadow is. You're Trey Hudson. You're going to investigate, and then what was the first thing that told you and your team, "Wow, this is we found something here"? Yeah,
probably the first thing that was just the real wow. It was like right off the bat, which is the crazy thing. And I'm going to consult my notes here. It was back in July of 2016. We had really started, kind of coming up with a modality to research, and we decided we were going to put numerous people out in the field with the various equipment and all of that, and we had two team members that had watched Bob Wilson, the well-known, cryptid guy, God rest his soul, passed away, last year. But he dropped down into the Meadow from the top of a ridge and was walking across it. And my other team members were watching him on their thermal when they saw him turn into a ball of plasma energy and move about 100 meters really, really quickly. And when they brought their thermals back up to where the orb winked out, the ball of energy winked out, he was standing there. So they had him come over to them, and they explained what they had seen. And they said, Bob, how do you feel? You just turned into a ball of energy. And he goes, no, I didn't. I just walked over here. What are you talking about? And so the crazy thing is, it's kind of like it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, where you have two realities existing at the same time, or the dual slit experiment, the famous physics experiment where light is both a particle and a wave at the same time. Bob was both a plasma ball of energy that was observed moving across the Meadow, and he was also just a guy walking across a field at the same time, at the same place. So what you're seeing is quantum effects at a macro level.
Right.
And I think that is some of the stuff that's happening at these other locations of extreme high strangeness, is you have a place where the quantum effects that usually only happen at a very, very small, tiny level happen now in a macro level where we can see them, with our own eyes and experience them without any special equipment.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any dangers with this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you this, and I'm not saying correlation equals causality, but you have to consider it.
Sure.
Is the Portal, the famous Portal film that was featured on Discovery. It's going to be featured in the upcoming film. The one that, kind of put the Meadow on the map. Is of the 4 people that went into that portal, only 2 are still alive. I've got other team members, some people Kristen has health effects.
Yep.
Her health is not great, after experiencing the Meadow. Bob Wilson's cancer came back with a vengeance. He's not with us. Tim Gillardin, our physicist on the team, died unexpectedly of a pulmonary embolism after experiencing the Meadow. And this isn't a isolated case. You go back and you look at some of the work of Gary Nolan.
Yeah.
it's really read his stuff, and some of the effects of what appear to be non-ionizing radiation on members of Robert Bigelow's NIDS team at Skinwalker Ranch, National Institute for Discovery Science, mimics non-ionizing radiation. And I've got a whole chapter in my second book on health effects. My good friend Matt Delph had a very bad health effect after visiting a site in the Smoky Mountains. So, I tell people, this isn't, if you really get into this business, and like I said, I'm not talking about going to Aunt Edna's supposedly haunted house with a recorder and a K2 meter. I'm talking about if you really get into, if you put on your hip waders and you jump knee deep, chest deep, neck deep into weird shit, there's a risk. There's a very real risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk you can be damaged psychologically, and there's a risk you can be damaged physically, and there's a risk you could die. So, if I would be negligent if I didn't, explain to people, to be aware of this risk. And if they're going to make a cognitive or cognizant decision to get involved in this, they really understand what, what's at stake.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with you, because same thing with Marley Woods, there's several that long investigators there. Bad things have happened as well. So yeah, it's just Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Piero and I have talked about the effects of that. And I asked him, what have you experienced? And he's, basically the same kind of stuff, that we've had, the same health issues. So it's it's nothing to mess around with. It's very dangerous. And so far, 50% of us are still alive that went into the portal. So keeping my fingers crossed, because I was one of them.
Sure. Sure. It's scary stuff. It really is, and honestly, I know the area where Marley Woods is.
Yep.
Do I want to go there? I really don't. I mean, and same thing with the Meadows. Honestly, I would have no inkling to come there. I have young kids and still at home. I have grandkids, I just, it's not something I'm willing to risk right now,
It's kind of sad. And it was, kind of precognition. We didn't realize it, but there's a video that I shot of us getting ready to go into the portal, or the remnants of the portal. And we were joking on who has the highest life insurance policy.
Wow.
And here we are.
Yeah. That's scary stuff. It really is. I've had, we've done shows on Marley Woods, and then we've also we had the farm manager Thomas Winterton from Skinwalker Ranch on, and he talked about his health issues and things like that from out there. It's just really scary stuff. It really truly is. I commend you guys, because I know you guys are doing it for research, for to try to. You're looking for the answers we're all looking for, and you're putting your lives on the line by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's had his own.
A lot of respect for you, man.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's kind of like Shackleton, and back in the 19th century, and even before that, Magellan and all the explorers going up, because they just had a quest. They just had this desire to know what was out there. What's on the other side.
Yeah.
And maybe some people just aren't happy with the 9 to 5 stuff, and we've got to go out there and try to rattle the bush a little bit and see what kinds of ill-gotten fruit falls from the branches.
Yeah.
Really briefly, I got to thank T-Bone, Ben YouTubing, Keith, Whispering, Portals, Mike Bothwell, and Carl Bittner for your awesome support and donations to the show, whether it's a super chat or a BMR pirate membership. Thank you so much. Donations not expected, always appreciated by you guys. Thank you ever so much. Trey Hudson's on the show, and Trey, I want to get into this portal thing too a little bit further. I'm talking about the cube and this and the health effects, and when somebody experiences. Now, you've had members of your team walk into a portal and disappear on the thermal and reappear.
Yeah, that's we started the way that night went down, and that was in February of 2017, is we started seeing, and kind of, let me back up. The way we run our operations, it's kind of like a military operation. Not that we're militaristic, we're not, like militiamen running around. Not like, we're not that at all. But we do run our operations very similar to a military operation because it works. Just that format works. And so what we'll do is we'll put our teams out on specific locations, and I'll have a map in a drawing of the area, and I will make team assignments before we ever leave base camp. You go to this, the extreme, western corner there in that little alcove. You set up a listening post, observation post. You go over here. You have thermal. So everybody knows where everybody is. So on that particular night, that's what we did. Is we had everybody set up on location. Nobody leaves station unless they receive permission from the tactical commander, who is the person in charge in the field. You have an operational commander who's over the whole expedition, but the tactical commander is the guy or gal that's actually out there running the thing. So we had walked across the top of the ridge, a 3-man team walked across the top of the ridge while we had team members down below. And Daryl Neese looked through his thermal, and he goes, "Is that a box sitting down in the meadow?" And I'd forgotten all about this until I heard him on an interview, not too long ago. I'd forgotten all about that. But he said, "Is that a box sitting in the meadow? It looks like a telecom box, like the green boxes you see on the side of the road, for fiber optics and all of that." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I bring my thermal up, and I see deer, very distinctive thermal outline of deer. And he brings it up and he goes, "Oh, I see the deer." So, we just kind of forgot about the box. Then Bob Wilson brings his thermal up, and he sees a man-sized heat signature. And I'm saying man-sized, it's about 6 foot tall, 18 inches wide. So that's about, 2 meters tall, maybe 1.75 meters wide. And 0.75 meters wide. And so he starts filming this thing, and this man's shaped heat signature that doesn't correspond to any of our team members, gets big, small, big, small, big, and then splits into 2 distinctive heat signatures, then goes away.
Wow.
So we already got, dare I say, entities, showing up on our thermals. So we drop down into the meadow, and then we start getting a call from, I remember if it was Kristen or David Pardue. One of the two said, "Hey, y'all need to come over here. We're seeing these boxes in the field." And so the way they described it is they would pick up their thermals and they would see like a box or a cube in the field, and then it would dissipate, and then it would show up somewhere else. And these things are like moving around the field.
Wow.
So we quickly get up next to them. And about the time we get up to them, they said, "Hey, there was one right there in front of us, about 30 yards in front of us, and it dissipated. It's gone." And, we don't know what happened to it. And we made the decision to dispatch a team to where that thing was. And when the team got to the remnants of it, their heat signatures completely disappeared from thermal. 100% gone, completely obliterated. No heat signature at all. This was in February in the mountains. So there is no vegetation. And we've tried to recreate that and haven't been successful. And so they described it as going into this area. It was very dark. It was very cold. They didn't encounter any branches or brambles going in. But yet after 90 seconds, when they came back out, they were having to fight their way through the brush that didn't exist there before. Once again, it seemed like there were 2 realities existing at the same time, at the same place. One reality where there weren't any bushes and brambles, and another reality that was the normal, woods at night. And about that time on the video, Kristen turns to the right and she says, "Who or what is that?" And there's a small group of trees about 50 yards from where we were. And there were 2 heat signatures standing in that group of trees watching us that did not correspond with any team members.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, I love hearing that. I remember about 3 years ago, like I mentioned earlier, when I first met you, talked to you and Bob. I was humbled enough, fortunate enough to meet Bob, and you did your presentation, and you did it, and I saw this, and I was like, it was the most incredible video I'd ever seen, literally.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because you're on the show. I talk about it
Mhm.
all the time. And whenever you're on my show or any of our shows, I love hearing it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be heard.
Yeah, it was and since then, I had presented the video to the Discovery Channel. They had a panel of experts review it. And they came up, it was not hoaxed. It was inconclusive. And so, I thought, okay, so you have other people that were doing vignettes on this TV show that,
Right.
they would see things and they were calling it UFOs. I had something really cool on the ground and they're like, oh, that's inconclusive. So I developed a term called a UTE, a unexplained terrestrial event. I was going to call it an unexplained terrestrial incident, but who wants to say I went out in the woods with a bunch of my friends and came back with a really interesting UTI? That sounds weird. So we didn't go with UTI.
No.
No, so we didn't. So UTE. So that was a remarkable UTE. And I just submitted the video to MUFON, and they put it through some pretty rough, really, really good analysis. And I haven't had a chance to really sit down and digest their, I think it's a 16-page report. But, once again, it was the heat signatures were completely obliterated, and I can't explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the cube too, and we've seen the cube on other TV shows as well. I think
Yeah, the cube is so weird. I actually wrote a chapter in my second book talking about these cubes because it seems to be a very prevalent archetype.
Yeah.
And, we can go all the way back, in history. And the Ark of the Covenant was a box, 6 sides. And something magical and powerful was in that box. It could kill you if you didn't treat it with reverence.
Wow.
The tabernacle, as the Hebrews moved through the desert, was a tent shaped like a box that held a box. The temple in Jerusalem had the Holy of Holies, a Sanctum Sanctorum, which was a box that held a box, which was the Ark of the Covenant, a cube, if you will. The Kaaba in Mecca, very holy to Islam, is a large black cube. In the corner of that cube is a reliquary or a black rock that fell from space. In the book of Revelations, when the New Jerusalem comes down from the sky during the second coming of Christ, if you believe in that kind of stuff, Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, is talked about being a perfect cube.
Wow.
1,400 meters square, or cube, rather. Carl Jung talks about, let me back up. Alchemists talk about something called the prima materia, which was the prime materia. And they believe that the prima materia was the sacred essence of all matter. And when the alchemists would represent this graphically, it was a black cube. And I can go into the Carl Higdon case, black cube, Katie Page at the Clearview Ranch, cubes, the Meadow cubes, the Chupa Chupas in Brazil, cubes, the Flying Winnebagos at the Bigelow era of Skinwalker Ranch, cubes, golden cubes that were sighted on the ranch during the TV shows. So there's something about these cubes. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say I know what they are.
Right.
I don't. But there's something about this cube shape. And I actually have a variation that I created of the poster over my right shoulder, where instead of a flying saucer, it's a black cube, and it says, "I want to believe."
It's so interesting because, for just the average person that's not into these things, they're like, wow, that's like far-fetched. And I believe it to exist, of course.
Me too.
But with myself, though, okay, let me ask you this. because I've talked to many people, been doing this for a little bit now. Do you think this cube is something that's, and again, if I'm wording this incorrectly, my fault, from a different dimension, something slipping
Yeah.
through the veil?
Yeah.
Or do you think that maybe in some instances, maybe not yours in particular, is something that our own government has created?
No, I don't think it's a governmental thing.
Okay.
I just don't, because it just doesn't make sense, because the government would have had to get in the time machine and go all the way back to biblical times, in order to influence, the sacredness of the cube form, back throughout history. So no, I don't think it's the government. I do think what it may be is, do you know what a tesseract is, or hypercube?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of y'all that that are listening, imagine a cube inside of a cube with all the corners connected. That's a hypercube. But in the fourth dimension, one dimension above us, all those angles are right angles.
Yeah.
So a tesseract, as we perceive it, is a shadow of a multi-dimensional or fourth dimensional object where all the angles are right angles. So I think that the cubes that we're seeing are actually a shadow of a multi-dimensional something. And it's so complex and so other that we can't perceive it, but somehow it manifests itself into our dimension as a cube. Now, why a cube? I don't know. Why do diatoms look like diatoms, in diatomaceous earth? They just do. Why do snowflakes all have six arms? They just do. So why does a multidimensional whatever it is, be it a sentient being, a vessel, a craft, a thought form, energy, whatever, why does it manifest in our dimensions as a cube? We don't know, but one thing we can look at is whenever you see a cube where one's not supposed to be, weird shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to wrap your mind around, but I thoroughly get it. It's just like, because typically before I followed you and saw your presentation, the portal always to me was something, it was a ripping fabric, and you could fall into it walking in the forest or driving down the road. And then it comes across these things about people that have missing time, or they say they time travel. And let me run something by. I was thinking about this just the other night. I don't know if you believe in time travel, this, that, or the other, but I was just thinking, I remember I was researching something on the Bermuda Triangle. And back, you remember the 5 Navy airplanes that they fell in that electrical windstorm or whatever it allegedly was?
Yeah, Flight 19.
Flight 19, yeah. And so I guess from what I was recalling from that, some things that I happened to just look up, as you mentioned earlier in the show, all we can do is, like I had to go to the library too, Trey, when I was in college.
Yeah.
So is there a space, let's say I'm going to use my hands for those people listening to the podcast, I apologize. Let's say there's a space in my hands and you have an airplane here or wherever. And you're traveling through this space, and you hit a vortex or something. And what it does is then it compresses all this, makes it tighter and tighter. So in actuality, what's happening is when you are on the other end of this, is that projecting you faster and more forward into time out of the current time that it's existing, if that makes sense? Yeah, it does. I mean, you're talking about relativistic shifts in time. Okay. Something we started doing, and I encourage other researchers to do, is Steve Mira over in the UK suggested something to me, that we start measuring time at the Meadow. And so one of the pieces of equipment I picked up is called a differential time meter. And it measures the difference of a second from a base unit to a probe that's 100 feet out. And we're starting to pick up little tiny variances in time. Time runs differently. Now, if you start wondering what are some indicators of some of these areas of high strangeness, something I'm starting to wonder, are we seeing little tiny micro singularities, which are tiny black holes?
if you have a tiny black hole, you're going to have an extreme gravity pit or relativistic sink where time will run differently, and it'll cause time to be compressed. The closer you get to it or the stronger it is, time will be compressed, and it'll run differently near these gravities or these relativistic sinks than they would outside of them. So if you have little tiny micro singularities, if you expand on that, is it reasonable that maybe we have some that are a little bit larger that could affect time on a much larger scale? Could it affect aircraft? Could it affect navigation? Like Shakespeare said, there's more to heaven and earth than in your books, Horatio. And the world is a heck of a lot stranger than we think it is. And sometimes I stay up at night just thinking about this stuff, trying to come up with I don't not only know the answers, I don't even know what the questions are half the time.
Sure.
So that's something that I've been working with discussing with some physicists about, are we talking about maybe micro singularities causing tiny relativistic sinks? And that's why we see these tiny spikes of radiation, in places like the Meadow and places like Skinwalker Ranch.
Sure.
We're talking, 0.06 baseline of microsieverts per hour to, 0.13, 0.33, 0.66 little tiny spikes. And are those indicators? That's one of the things that I'm looking at doing, is seeing if I can find indicators that are measurable, that if you see these indicators, they're basically a precursor to extreme high strangeness. So when you see X, Y, or Z, it's like, okay, I'm going to put my seatbelts on because it's getting ready to get really weird. And then you can have hopefully the proper recording equipment and measurement equipment, deployed that would pick these things up. So
I find it all fascinating talking about these subjects. Trey Hudson, our guest, the Meadow Project, Return to the Meadow. Find his books, and your books are on Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
Okay. It would not be right if I don't, because we're getting close to the end of the show. We're almost 90 minutes. Well, 90 minutes the show ends. I got to ask you, Sasquatch, Dogman, you see them in your research? Do you believe in them? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm getting ready to rock your world because I showed this to Tex and it sure rocked his. Okay.
Oh, you did. Tex.
Okay. Yeah, I saw him a few weeks ago. My train of thought just got derailed. Dogman. If you go back and you look at these other places of high strangeness, if you go back and you read some of Ted Phillips' accounts of Marley Woods, there are witness accounts of large upright canines being seen by people in areas around Marley Woods, and I talk about that in the chapter, my Marley Woods chapter.
Yep.
If you go and you read the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, one of the NIDS researchers talks about when he returned to his home back in Virginia after leaving Skinwalker Ranch, his family started sighting a large upright canine in their yard. Okay, fast forward. I do all my stuff out in the Meadow. Like I said, the phenomena is changing. I come back to my home in Alabama, and 40 meters from where I'm sitting right now, I found this. Let's see.
Wow, it's a print.
That is a 6-inch scale.
Wow.
Yeah, look at that. That's tremendous.
Let's see if here we go.
Well, I can see it perfectly even on the computer on the screen. Yeah, that's
so.
Wow.
I've got, and then I've got. Let me see if I can get the track line here. And the track line, believe it or not, is bipedal.
Hey, look at that. That's awesome.
So, there is something to this Dogman stuff, and why the Dogman is an archetype that follows people that have had extreme high strangeness, I really don't know. But it seems to be there's a correlation between upright bipedal canines in areas of extreme high strangeness.
Yeah. And you mentioned the key word follow, because I've heard of that, with the Dogman before.
Yeah, yeah, and and people also have hitchhiker phenomena. People have this phenomena. When Greg and his film team were down working with us, at the Meadow, some of his team members had had things follow them home.
Yeah.
So that's something you've got to kind of be prepared for too.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Rags asks really quickly, how big were the Dogman prints?
I'll pull it back up here. That white, that is a 6-inch scale. That white scale is 6 inches.
Ah, gotcha.
It's pretty big.
So that's actually a forensic photographer scale that I keep with me.
That's
so
pretty big.
that's
Wow.
That's actually big.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you said it's right outside where your home. Do you live in a rural area?
I live up in the woods. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, not that it matters because they in cities. I was just
they have. I keep a big bucket of milk bones, next to me so I can throw them out there.
There you go.
So I got to ask you this. I'm sure that the prints, the tracks stopped somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they just kind of started, went a distance, and then just sort of stopped.
What's your thoughts on that? Everyone's got a different theory. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm almost done with that and wrecking my brain because it's part of the phenomenon.
It's kind of like people talked about Sasquatch track lines that just start, travel a distance, and then just stop. And these are people that are trained wildlife trackers, and they just disappear. We had an incident in the Meadow where we had two. I'm going to kind of call them. They were kind of like tire tracks. That's the only way I can describe them. Is they were about, maybe 12 inches wide, parallel, compressing the grass in the meadow, not pushing it down, laying it over, traveling a distance, and then just stopping. Like something dropped down, traveled a distance, and was lifted out. And the ant hills and stuff in the track lines weren't compressed. So they were like linear crop circles. So once again, that's one of those things where something just starts, and maybe as things wink in and out of our existence, they'll wink in just enough to maybe have some sort of physical change. And as they wink out, they dissipate. And maybe it's nothing purposeful. Maybe it's just like, when we walk through a smoke from a campfire, we just happen to walk into an environment that's a little bit different, and then we walk out. And maybe whatever is causing this doesn't even know they're making a track line in our dimension. Maybe they're not even paying attention. And quite frankly, maybe they don't care.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, probably not. And again, my thoughts, that's another show, dimensional versus flesh and blood. I happen to believe combination of both, of course. I will tell you this. Every Dogman encounter experience that's been brought to me or that I've read or looked up, it's like the weirdest thing where they just don't seem to be, to me anyways, a flesh and blood creature. I think they're dimensional. That's just my 2 cents, and we're not going to get into it tonight. But yeah, it's just fantastic. And with Sasquatch, Trey, flesh and blood, supernatural, So it's like, where do you go with these? What I love about what I do, probably what you do, what Christa does, is the mystery behind this, because I will always have a podcast because I don't want the mystery to ever be solved. I want to learn, and just it's so fascinating, the mystery behind all of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in the 21st century and we think we're so damn smart because, we can look up, what was the Lone Ranger's nephew's horse's name? The horse's name was Victor, in case anybody wants to know.
Yeah, right.
But, we can look up obscure facts like that.
Right.
And there's no mystery left in the world.
Right.
But by God, there is mystery left in the world. And how exciting is that? I get hope in that. That gives me, that makes me happy. That gives me hope that there's still things I don't understand.
Lots of things I don't understand.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it. I always say this, hell, not just me. We all say this. When you think you know something, you really don't. And that could be with anything in life, to be honest with you. Trey Hudson, where can we find you for other activities? And you mentioned you've got a film coming out too, documentary. If you want to promote that a little bit, what's up with that?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, where can you find me? Go behind the greasy alley behind the local liquor store. Look under a cardboard box. I'll be asleep with cheap vodka in my hands.
I'm kidding. Well, that's why I was, okay, this guy, I can hang with this guy.
Trey Hudson -author on Facebook. TreyHudsonResearch.com is my website. My books, shameless plug here. My first book, The Meadow Project, Explorations in the South Skinwalker Ranch, and Return to the Meadow, Further Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch, can be found on Amazon. So just type in just type my name, Trey Hudson. You'll see them. I would love it for y'all to buy the book. I think the ebook is a hell of a deal, a hell of a bargain. A lot of really cool stuff in there. My film is worked with a pretty well-known filmmaker. We're trying to get that thing out here sooner than later. The Meadow keeps throwing us curveballs, things we think we got it figured out, and something miraculous happens like last week, and I'm going to save it for the film. Yeah. But hopefully we'll be able to get it in there. We're not too far along on editing, but that will be out hopefully this summer. I've seen some of the work in progress, the whip on that. It's really going to be neat. It's really going to be neat. If you want to kind of get a taste for the Meadow, take a look at Craig Ogle's
Land Between the Lakes.
Land Between the Cryptids. My mind just went completely blank. Cryptid Encounters, Land Between the Lakes. About the first third or so is some of their experiences out of the Meadow.
That's what I seen that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did. Yeah. Greg Ogle's a great guy. We'll be seeing him in September as well. I want to thank Carl Bittner. I want to thank Mike Bothwell, Whispering Portals, T-Bone, Keith, Ben YouTubing, T-Bone again for your contributions and donations. Thank you so much. Always appreciated. Love you guys. Hit that like button on your way out. Christa, today is Tuesday. What do you have going on Thursday on your show?
Honestly, we really don't have anything planned. No guests. My one Thursday of the month that I don't have a guest planned. We'll come up with something.
Well, it's always a great show. Subscribe to the Blondie and the Booze Paranormal podcast if not already. Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube if not already. Buy Trey's books, The Meadow Project, Return to the Meadow. Type Trey Hudson on Amazon. They'll pull up. Check out his film. Trey, there's so many people, and I was just talking with Christa last night. We've got this conference in September. We've got a combination of 20 speakers and special guests. Mm-hmm. If this conference takes off like we both think it's going to, right, Christa? We'll have another one, and you will be top on the list, my friend, if you wouldn't mind coming next year.
Absolutely.
Just let me know.
I will.
That'd be great. Yep.
That'd be awesome. Thanks to everybody again for coming on in. Thank you, Trey. It's always a pleasure when you're on. I always have such a great 90 minutes went by in 7 minutes. It's like, it's like we were talking earlier about that time travel, expediting speed, speed of sound, the speed of light, whatever you want to call it. And I'm really just making some things up so I can find the exit button. Thanks, Trey. Thanks, Chris. And thanks to everybody. We're out. Good night.
This is the future. Evolution.
The Crossing Realms Conference launches September 19th and 20th and will dock in Richmond, Missouri. This is already being called the event of the year, folks. With an unprecedented list of speakers and special guests, 2 days of cryptids, UFOs, and paranormal presentations, along with a celebrity-filled ghost hunt, meet and greet, gallery reading, vendors, and a film screening. This promises to be both educational and fun. Go to Eventbrite.com to secure your tickets and vendor slots before they are all abducted. They're going fast.